Hey, welcome to another episode of Dave's Imaginations. Today we recap perhaps our final episode of Dave's Imaginations presents Dark Queen Ascension, The Fate of Fortitude. Is it the final? Will our party survive this final showdown with Symmetrix? We're going to talk through that in just a minute. Stay with me. So when last we met, our adventurers were invading the old ruins of a wizard's tower in the town of Fortitude. A tower populated, currently controlled by the wizard Symmetrix. Symmetrix, who is in Fortitude looking for the Tome of Dragons, frustrated that she couldn't find it. She is called, so frustrated, she is called on a person that controls a purple worm to come and level the city until she finds this Tome of Dragons. Our adventurers, not waiting until the purple worms come to town, decide to take it upon themselves to take out Symmetrix in advance and perhaps prevent the purple worm attack from even happening. They storm the wizard tower, but as they approach, alarms pop, and the wizards are made aware of their approach, and fireballs start to go off back and forth. Giant apes are polymorphed, blade barriers controlled, explosions everywhere, battles going off. Symmetrix does a mislead, presents herself, and asks them to parlay, to concede, to simply give up, and there would be no more bloodshed. They say, no, we won't. And so the battle begins, and they realize this image that was giving them the deal was actually an illusion. And that's how he left the night prior. Oh, not quite. As our adventurers had gone into the building, into the wizard's barracks, and Symmetrix had flown up into the sky and started hitting them with lightning bolts and collapsed the ceiling on top of them and fireballs, and it was dire. But our adventurers are resilient. They have a lot of healing, and they would bring Brown to the very peak of being killed, but then they would heal themselves back up. But Symmetrix would hit them down again, and they'd heal themselves back up. And eventually, though, at the start of the night, Symmetrix had just blew them up with a fireball as they were digging themselves out of the rubble of the roof that she had previously collapsed on them. And she was hovering over them as they pulled themselves, and they can see her some 100 feet up in the air, and they try to figure out what to do. Uguay tries to feign dead. Others try to pull themselves out, not really attacking her. The ape that was outside maneuvers itself closer, trying to get to Symmetrix. Symmetrix lands on the side of the top of the wizard's tower, the ruined wizard's tower, holding on with her staff in the other hand, and she points at Katota, lifts him with the telekinetic ability of the staff 30 feet up in the air and says, "Surrender! Surrender!" But they don't surrender, and her spell is broken. Her spell is broken, and Katota falls 30 feet. Survives. And the ape goes and throws something at her, and she tries to block it, and she's able to keep her feet on the wall. And in her next turn, she teleports, Misty Steps, back into the wizard's tower, where the rest of her wizards are waiting in formation for someone to come through the door. And that someone would be Lorne. Lorne kicks open the door and steps through, and I can just hear the one wizard. He looks and he sees all the wizards have taken the visage of Symmetrix herself. There's 6 Symmetrix and one other. And he looks in confusion, and that's when the one other says, "Fire!" Fires, he says, and arcane bolts, zap, 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 zap. 5 different sets of 3. So 5 times 3, 15 arcane bolts come at Lorne. these arcane bolts of the Transmuter Wizard. They get 3 arcane burst attacks. Arcane burst attacks +6 to hit and 120-foot range. 3d10 plus 3, or 19 points of damage on each hit. And boy, did they hit. They hit him for 114 points of damage. 114 points of damage would have taken down Lorne. But if it weren't for the emboldening bond that Oogway had placed on him, the emboldening bond that bonded the 5 willing creatures together, and more specifically, the ability to do the protective bond, and that when a creature affected by the emboldening bond feature is about to take damage, a second bonded creature within 30 feet could take the place. So, taking the place, the ape wanted to trade places. The ape, with all of its hit points, wanted to take the place of Lorne, but the ape has the mentality of an ape, and I let him roll to see if he could do it. It was 15, a hard roll, but he has bonuses up later on for saves and roll checks. Fine, I'll let it happen. He rolls and he makes that save, and somewhere in the back of this ape's mind he says, I can absorb this damage instead of him. And he the ape teleports down in front of Lorne, taking the damage instead. 114 points of damage. Not quite putting it out. Alas, there was still one after the 114 points of damage. So there was still one. The person had called out the charge to attack himself. This dark cleric used Toll the Dead. And as he's about to toll the dead, Oogway himself uses the bond again to put himself in front of the ape as he takes damage of 3d12 from the Toll the Dead. So meanwhile, as all of this is happening, Zerwak decides he's going to take it upon himself to try to get the book, the tome of dragons, into more safe place. He uses his dimension door to put himself in a position to retrieve the book in the sub level of the wizard's tower. He goes down and he remembers that there's the puzzle of swiveling the statues to release the book, and he does this indeed. He swivels it, and the center statue lowers his hands down, and the book is there, and he retrieves it. And then he teleports. He uses a scroll teleportation, a very old scroll teleportation he just happens to have on him, and he barely remembers where or how this teleportation scroll works, but he uses it nonetheless just to get away at all. And Zerwak teleports to the small town of Blazendell, the very first town where the character was introduced, into some sub-level, some basement of some other building, but he knows he's safe, he's away. Meanwhile, all that's happening, we have Katota sneaking around. He comes to the side of the building. He peeks into the wizard's tower where all the wizards are, and they're just lambasting the rest of his friends. He sees them. He casts a fireball, and he nearly takes some out, but yet they survive. He's looking in the window. He sees all these Symmetrixes. And on the next turn, the wizards start to use their arcane blasts again, and they take down Oogway, I think it was, and then they take down the ape that with enough blast that it takes him not only down to reverts the ape back into the form of Darcel, but takes Darcel's health all the way down to 0 as well, taking him out. And with the remaining firepower of the wizards, they hit Lorne, and they take him down. I have 3 players down. 3 players down. Zerwak has left. Katota sits in wonder outside the arrow-slit wall, looking. As our party is all but left for dead. The first time I've ever had a total party kill. Almost. almost total party kill. Symmetrix steps forward and says, "Bring their bodies." And the dark cleric steps forward and was about to spare the dying on Uguay. He says, "No, don't worry about him or Darcel, the human. Bring me the paladin. Spare his life and bring him to me." And she looks over her shoulder and sees Katota out the arrow slit and says, "Why don't you join us?" And casts Dominate Person. Katota fails the save and follows them down. Now, as they go down, we have Lorne, spare the dying, unconscious, being carried to the lower chamber. We have Katota, charmed, falling down to the lower chamber. And as they go down, the other two are left for dead, unconscious, making saving throws, failing death saves. 2. They got to the point where they had 2 death saves and 2 death fails, I suppose. One of them rolled a natural 20 to get back to 1 hit point. The other finally saved on his third save. With his 5th attempt, made the save, but they come to and there's no one around. They hear voices below. There's no one around. They start to heal each other, and they don't know what's going on. Down below, Katota and Lorne are chained up. At some point, Katota comes to and starts to do his channel divinity, his healing powers, and he does. He heals himself. He heals Lorne, but the wizards notice, and they start to use their arcane bursts again, bam, 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 and takes them back down to unconscious. Not killing them. They didn't want them dead. They want their information. They would need to regroup first. So as they're doing this, that dark cleric does a mass cure wounds, I think it was, and heals up the wizards somewhat. Meanwhile, back on top of the wizard's tower, we have Uguay and Darcel, and they start to heal themselves. And Uguay finally relents and calls upon his deity. Uguay calls upon his god Ilmater. Ilmater, the deity of endurance, martyrdom, perseverance, and suffering, the crying god who was the patron of the suffering, oppressed, and persecuted. Ilmater, he calls on his god Ilmater using his divine intervention. And to do this, he needs to roll percentile dial. And if the roll is equal to or less than 13, the deity intervenes. And at first he rolls a d20, 2 d20s, because he did a great prayer in roleplay, and I gave him inspiration on the roll. He rolls 2 d20 and he fails. He doesn't beat a 13. But then we realize it's actually supposed to be a percentile dial, and I allow him to re-roll a much more difficult roll, rolling under 13 on a d100. But he has advantage. But he does it in his first roll. Ilmater responds to his prayer and says, "Are you ready? Are you willing to sacrifice yourself?" And Uguay relents and says, "Yes, my lord." Uguay says, "Yes." And so Ilmater is with him, and he starts to glow this radiance of Ilmater's presence, and he says, "Well, go ahead and show Symmetrix where the Tome of Dragons would be." And so Uguay makes his way down to the lower levels of the wizard's tower. Amongst all these wizards, amongst Lorne and Katota chained to the wall, and as he steps down there, you can hear the gasp, and Symmetrix says, "Finally, you've come to your senses. Come to give in." Uguay says, "Yes, I've come to show you where the Tome of Dragons would be." And he comes down, and now Uguay, he's never been here. He's never been to where the Tome of Dragons, but he is under the divine inspiration of Ilmater. He comes down, and he's drawing on the memories of his companions. He opens a secret chamber, a secret portal, secret door in the center of the room, using the runes that he doesn't know. Ilmater knows. He drawing on the memories of his companions. He opens this trap door to the lower level. ladder down to yet another level. He leads them through this dungeon, this lower dungeon, to a room, to the room with the beds of lava on either side, the statues on three spaces. He takes her to this statue, which happens to be a statue of Ilmater. Sure, why not? Statue of Ilmater, but his hands are out, and there is no book. So she says, "You lied! You have not brought me. Where is the Tome of Dragons?" And he says, "Let me show you." And he points down into the lava bed, and the lava starts to harden into a shape, and it shows a form of Zerok, somewhere off in the distance, holding this book. And this book changes from the stone shape into actual and comes into the hands of Oogway, disappearing, vanishing from the grasp of Zerok, who doesn't know what's going on, but has a mental connection through the bond that they have, that Oogway has given him. It goes to Oogway's hands, and Sim says, "Finally!" And she goes and grabs grabs the Tome of Dragons, but passes right through and falls into the lava herself. And Oogway makes some comment. Symmetrix has failed. Oogway has ascended. Something to the effect of, "I'm taking the Tome of Dragons to the heavens, Symmetrix, a place I'm sure you'll never have the pleasure of going." As she falls into the fire, Symmetrix says, "Death, I welcome thee. Death is only the beginning." As she shrivels up and her visage changes into something much more hideous before it finally is turned to ash. There's no one else there. Necron and another wizard went along with Symmetrix, but there's no one else there. Necron looks next to the wizard and pierces him. "Our job is done here. We should leave." They make their way out. Necron and the other wizard, they make their way up to the other wizard lower level. They gather the rest of the wizards and they head back to the orc camp. Meanwhile, we might remember there is still Darcel. Darcel fled, went and hid in the trees. He actually found the hidey hole of Dag. And as he's hiding, as he's watching out the windows or whatever, he sees the parade of wizards, one of which was a bluish-skinned, large-headed, green-eyed, alien-esque creature. A creature that was holding a red gem. The same red gem that was on the forehead of Dag. What was it? We don't really know. The party doesn't really know. It was some mind-controlling creature. We envision Dag. Hello? Where are you? Can I come back yet? Off somewhere deep in the forest. The voice in my head, it's gone. Can I come back yet? Is it okay? Darcel watches them go away. And as when he senses it's safe. Oh, another thing that happened in this time. We remember that the orcs have been put on alert, and the first portion of the orcs to reach the wizard's tower was a group of 3 wargs with orc riders. As they circle the orc tower, now there's not much they can do. They circle the orc tower. They come, and we talked about as they circle. I could just picture Mr. Fuzzy Boots hidden in a tree, biding his time. One warg passes. Second, the third is about to, and it pounces and tackles one of the orcs off of its mount, and it tears into its neck, killing the orc on the spot. But the other wargs and orcs circle around for another attack. Seeing that one of their friends has fallen, they circle around. The tiger tries to defend itself. It takes out another orc, another warg, perhaps. But eventually, we had to check fate. And we asked, does the tiger escape? I made that odds 50-50. I was not sure. We rolled, and fate would have it no. Mr. Fuzzy Boots dies to the hands of the orcs. Now, Katota and Lauren, left for dead, shackled in the basement. Necron, this other dark wizard, dark cleric, he doesn't care about them. He doesn't care about Lauren and Katota. He doesn't care about Fortitude. He cared about the tome and cared about serving Symmetrix and Semastro above her. But that's done now. He all he wants to do is leave and go to his next assignment. So, also the other epilogue issue was, you might recall that if the orcs were not told within 10 minutes they were supposed to start killing prisoners at the encampments. We might also remember that of the captains, there was Darkmar. Darkmar had volunteered to work at Fortitude because his cousin Trackmar was the owner of the Track Bar, and he was there, to make sure there wasn't any unnecessary killing. Trackmar's cousin, controlled one of the encampments. So, Darkmar and probably Helga, who has the young child, resisted and overthrew their encampment. We hand wave that. This is epilogue stuff. The other encampment we envisioned had Trackmar himself, and we threw Phil in there. Sure, Phil's in there with Trackmar, and I pictured Trackmar like Mr. Incredible from the first movie. Out of shape, years away from adventuring, sucks in his gut, grabs his nearest weapon, and this old barbarian goes to knock some heads as Trackmar and Phil and any other able bodies at the encampment overthrow their encampment. Fortitude survives. Other epilogue 2, days later, on the 10 day that the worms were supposed to arrive. The worms do arrive off in the distance. Our party, who had retreated to the Winterstone Temple, as crumbled as it might be, as ransacked as it might be, they went back to the Winterstone Temple to hide out. As the orcs gathered their gear and left. As the wizards gathered their gear and left. But the worm attack was never called off. The worms show up on that 10 day. The worms show up to where they were supposed to be, but there was no payment. The other half of the payment, they were given half the payment up front, but the other half of the payment was not there. The person they were supposed to follow, take directions from, was not there. I imagine the worms led by their two bullet riders, drow bullet riders, who have this way of putting charges in the ground that give the seismic temptation that the worm desires and follows. These purple worm trainers lead the purple in and around the town. I can imagine it coming through and looking for some treasure, anything, but they find nothing. After an hour or so, the worms, the bullet riders, the drow, they give up and they leave. And that is the fate of Fortitude. Uwe ascended to the heavens with the Tome of Dragons. Symmetrix, at least this version of her, has perished. Necron and this odd alien have left. What further adventures could happen for it? We don't know. But our next adventure lies somewhere else. Before I dive into what our next adventure is, please take a moment. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed. I'm not subscribed. Why would you subscribe? Who cares about this stuff, right? I get it. So, what did you think about the end? Did you like the end? Did you think you were going to survive? Tell me. Write down in the comments. Tell me if you thought, if you enjoyed it, if you liked the ending. Let me know. I appreciate it. And while you're down there, hit that like and subscribe. I appreciate it. Otherwise, let's talk about what's next. Not next week. 2 weeks. 2 weeks. We'll be back. We'll be back as we begin Descent into Avernus. You might recall from our previous adventure from the Rise of Tiamat that as we defeated Tiamat, one of our own, Gloin, who had been a ghost, is trapped, had died in the pursuit of ending the ceremony of Tiamat, ceremony of dragons at the Well of Dragons. He had perished, and his ghost here in the mortal plane, but his body, his physical presence, was trapped in Avernus. So as they defeated, as the wizards at the Well of Dragons were beginning to open a portal that was letting Tiamat back into the mortal plane, and as our adventurers defeated those wizards, they had the opportunity to jump into the portal and into Avernus to perhaps save Gloin. Now, Olak did just that. Olak jumped into the plane to save Gloin. You might remember Ruckus, our wereshark, as he gains the powers of his next level of abilities, goes insane with the madness that the Dark Lord, of not satisfying his charge of his Dark Lord, the requirements of killing a certain number of humans. And so he goes insane. He goes in a murderous rage, and knowing this is going to happen, he jumps into Avernus, into the portal, away from the rest of humans other than Olak. Seeing that Ruckus is doing this, their companion Christiana, the monster hunter, hoping he could help Ruckus, follows him into the portal. So those three are in Avernus already. They're going to look for their friend Gloin and help each other out. In the first level of hell, we'll have to see how that goes. Will they find Gloin? Will they be able to pull Ruckus out of his murderous rage? We'll have to find out. That's in 2 weeks. And what other characters might they find? I have 2 players. I have 2 players that need to roll up characters to figure out how their story works into the Descent into Avernus. And we have to figure out what Descent into Avernus really means. We'll see that and a lot more 2 weeks from now as we come back to Dave's Imaginations Presents. What should I call it? I haven't figured it out yet. So until then, appreciate you watching and take care. Bye for now.